Hey, Pastor, hey, church leader. My name is Craig. I'm the director of marketing here at Injoy Stewardship. And today we're going to be talking about 5 ways to maximize engagement in your personal finance group study. So I'm joined by Whitney. She is our director of personal finance, talks to churches a lot about how to maximize engagement in their personal finance curriculum, their group studies. And so we want to talk about, there's probably a lot more than 5 ways that we could go over, but we wanted to kind of just hit maybe the top 5 or 5 that you think are the most impactful when you talk to churches. So what are you seeing right now, or maybe what are you telling churches when you get on the phone with them and they've decided we're going to do this?
Yeah.
How do we make sure that the most people get the most out of it?
Yeah. So I think the first and most important one is training and equipping champions.
Okay.
So you're going to identify and train those champions, whether that's a lay leader in your church, someone that is on your staff, whatever it is. If you have someone who is pushing that and is intentional about it,
Right.
then you're going to see success in it. When we're talking about any type of New Year's resolution that you want to make, you want to have intentionality behind it. The same is true of your personal finance group study. If you have those people and you've found those people in your church that are going to drive that, they're going to be consistent, that are going to sit and say, hey, it's time again. It's that time of year that we got to run this group study. And I want to invite people into it. You're going to have so much more success. So I would say start by identifying who those champions are for that in your church.
Right. And like you mentioned, it may not be your staff. It may not be a staff member.
Yeah.
It could absolutely be a lay leader. It can absolutely be a volunteer, someone who comes in. And quite frankly, a lot of times it does end up being, a volunteer that is really passionate about this.
Definitely.
I feel like more often than not, that's who we see really start championing these.
Yes.
Things,
And when I say champions, it doesn't have to be a singular person. Given on how big your church is, like if your church is a larger church, you may need several people that you want driving that. And when I'm saying that too, there's got to be a passion from the church and from the leadership in the church for that to be their vision. But having those lay leaders there that are going to sit and say, hey, this is something that I really feel like God can utilize my giftings and talents and abilities to serve the people in my church. Activate those people.
Right.
Sit and say, hey, you have this. What does it look like to live this out in a way that can serve other people in your church?
Right. And they become living, breathing testimonials, right, for what's worked and what can happen. And then that's another point was, if your church has been doing this for a year or 2 years or longer, you're probably going to have testimonials about what life change has taken place.
Exactly.
And that was something you had mentioned about being another really core thing to drive more engagement and get more people involved, was having those pieces.
100%. So one thing, we have a team member of ours, Brian Dodd, who talks about like when you're sharing things, you can share statistics, you can share God's word, and you can share stories. And he's like, hey, stats will tell, but stories sell. And so when you're sitting and saying, hey, we want you to be a part of something, yeah, we all know how many people live paycheck to paycheck, or maybe we have a rough idea of it.
Right.
And that's alarming. And, that's going to drive that. But when you hear someone's story saying, this is where I was and here's where I'm at now, that can really move people in that way where they're sitting and saying, that's what I want to be.
Right.
I see myself in that person's story. I know that I want to achieve something different in my life. And hearing them be really candid about their own journey helps me to sit and say, okay, I need to take a step in. So with that, if you've done it before, like you said, ask those people to share their story in a way to sit and say, hey, if you keep your story to yourself, it's going to help you and you alone. If you're willing to share your story, it can help so many others that are in a spot where you used to be to see that there's a path forward. And what I would say too to pastors and church leaders is if you haven't done that yet and it's not part of something and part of your normal rhythm, don't worry, because we actually have a whole bunch of testimonials too for you, because we know that's so impactful. So we actually put together as part of our promotional materials for the I Was Broke Now I'm Not group study, we have a whole list of testimonials that have come from people where they're sitting and saying, this is how I felt encouraged. I know that I can do this. This is what's happening there. Because it's so important to share that with other people. And we don't want you to feel like you're on this island going, okay, great, we're trying to get started for the first time ever, and we don't have the stories. So just rest at ease. We've got that covered. We've thought of that for you, so think about that.
So something you kind of reminded me of when you talked about the testimonials that we have in our promotional packet. So that's another thing is promoting it, and how do you promote it, and how do you let people know that, hey, there's a group study happening there, we can help you, you can join up and sign up for this. So maybe talk about what's in our promotional packet. What should pastors or churches be doing to promote, and where should they be promoting this?
Yeah. So one of the things we want to think about is utilizing multiple channels.
Okay.
So if you really want to have a strong emphasis on something like this, it can't just be an aftermath of thought that's over here. So what we've done with our promotional packet is really make it all inclusive. We have videos that can be part of your Sunday morning announcements. We have slides that you can drop in a QR code for people to register for. We have material and copy that can go in newsletters. We have things for social media. So we have an awesome girl on our team named Emma, and she was a rock star earlier this year and developed out a whole entire social media page with clickable links into Canva. So it literally has reels and posts and all kinds of different things for format for both Facebook and Instagram. And so what it's sitting and saying is, hey, you need to make sure that you're giving people multiple avenues to see this, and encouraging them to sit and say, hey, remember this invitation that we talked about? So what we've done is put together this all-inclusive promotional packet where you can sit and say, hey, we have all the copy and promotional materials done for us. All we have to do is drop in the QR code for people to register, and it's there and ready. So, that's what I would just say is, if you really want to drive engagement, it has to be something that you're willing to talk about and to do that. So think about using multiple different channels.
Yeah. And putting it in places where people will see it.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
And so, all right, we have a church. They want to do the group study. They decided they're going to do it. They have champions. They get the testimonials. They start promoting it. But then there's probably still that person who's like, I'm not going to.
Yeah.
No, not right now. What's maybe some incentives, right? What can a church do, or maybe what are some of the churches that you're talking to? What are they doing to maybe get that last step, that last 10 to 15% of people to actually jump in and do the group study? Because I know that's another one of the things that we talk about is finding ways to provide incentives for people to come and do this, and again, like we talked about many times, removing the barriers that they might immediately put up to not do it. So maybe what are some of those incentives that you've seen?
Yeah. So some things to think about is, the time and the money that people are going to be investing there. So what you're talking about is, hey, we want to have them step into that. So consider something like, hey, we're going to provide childcare during that. So that way it removes that barrier of entry. Another thing that I've seen a lot of churches do is they'll subsidize a portion of the cost or all of the cost of the group study materials for the people. Now, this is a good question that I get. Does it make sense to subsidize all of it? Well, usually we see that there's a higher level of retention when they have some type of buy-in. So, for a lot of churches, maybe it's sitting and saying, hey, we want them to pay for part of the materials, but we're going to take care of part of that. So that becomes an incentive to sit and say, hey, we've covered this. We want to give this to you. And so we want you to take part of this. So we've contributed this and helped that to just reduce the load for your family as you step into this. I had another church that used it as an incentive to say, hey, if you come and you complete the class, at the end of it, we're going to give you a gift card towards groceries, or we're going to do something like here's a gift card for you and your spouse to go on a date night to do that. And so it's almost sitting and saying, hey, what do we want to have happen at the end of this? Does our church have a benevolence fund or something within that or within our budget that we can do some type of incentive for that or help subsidize a part of the cost of it? And if so, what does that look like? And this is, again, not a one size fits all. This is think about, talk about, pray about, look at what your church has the ability to, and make that decision that works right for you. But that's something to kind of consider is like, is there an incentive that you can do to help people, move past that hesitation to jump in?
Right. And then there's also those people who maybe feel like even with the incentive that they still can't do it. Right. And so I think almost, 1A is, potentially being willing to provide a scholarship, but But to your point, right, we see a lot more success when people have some sort of skin in the game, or they have to put something up to do it. And that can look like, just having people apply, right?
Yep.
Sometimes may be enough.
100%. So that's kind of our fifth one, is to sit and say, hey, offer some type of scholarship. You are going to have people that are in financial crisis that maybe even $15, $20, $30 feels like something that they don't even know how to do. So what does that look like to offer a scholarship for those individuals, where it's not a handout, it's a hand down to help them, so they can have a hand up and sit and say like, hey, we're going to pull you up through this. And that's that imagery that we talk about over and over again, is to sit and say, we want to equip you. So what does that look like? And I love what you mentioned where, okay, what does that scholarship look like? They have to apply for it. There's something that they want to do that. We have a church that we've partnered with called Southside that's in Canada, and they have this amazing outreach that they do with these hampers and baskets. And so they'll put together basically groceries and resources and gift cards for people in their community that are in financial need, and they'll gift that out into their community. Well, as part of that, they actually invited and provided a scholarship into the class for any of those people that had been recipients to that hamper that was coming out.
Wow.
And so they had people step into that. And they shared a story with us earlier this year where there was a single mom who was in there who had come out of a situation with domestic abuse and had been living in a shelter with her 3 kids. And she stepped into and came to the financial learning experience, went through the I Was Broke, Now I'm Not class. And now at the end of the year, not only was she able to then get on a budget that worked for her and buy back her home so her and her kids could be in a home there, but now they're part of being people that are contributing and putting together the baskets for outreach.
Wow.
So that invitation, that scholarship, I know, I'm getting teary-eyed. That one, the first time when they shared it, I was like crying there, watching it and just seeing the impact that happens there. But that invitation into that, that knowing that there are people that are in spots where they just feel really hopeless. So giving an opportunity to those, understanding that everyone's circumstances is different. So consider doing something like that for people there. Look at what's happening within benevolence within your church or community outreach and see if there's an opportunity to pair this as an invitation to really help people get on a good path.
Right. And ultimately, it's about getting people to take their next step financially and finding out what that is across the board, right? Because it could be, you could have that middle class people, what's their next step? And then, blue collar people that are, there's people that are paycheck to paycheck. There's all sorts of people in your ministry, in your church. And how can we identify and find the right ways where they can all engage? Because at the end of the day, that's what you want.
Exactly.
As much engagement as possible so people take their next step, right? So
exactly. And we don't know the circumstances of what their finances look like. Some people may look like they're thriving, but they're living off of credit. And they're living paycheck to paycheck and they're financially stressed. So it's sitting and saying, hey, we want to cultivate this place where we're talking about it in a way where it's uplifting and encouraging. We're, giving those invitations and avenues. We're giving them, we're creating scholarships for those that are in need. The end goal, like you said, is to just have as many people come in and experience that life change, because it's not just the changes that are going to happen in their personal finance and the financial freedom that they're encountering, but it's also the spiritual and emotional freedom that's going to happen within that too. And it really leads to peace in their life.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're a pastor or church leader that has decided, hey, we want to do a personal finance group study, we want to take this next step, take some of these tips, right? And again, like I said, there's plenty more ideas and plenty more things that your church could do, but these are just some ideas that'll help enhance the engagement and hopefully have more people be able to step into that. But if this is something where you feel like maybe there's more, maybe you have a couple questions about how it would work with your church and what you could do, I'd encourage you to schedule a call with Whitney. She knows a lot more about personal finance and how to actually make this happen in a church than I do. So we'll put a link down in the description where you guys can actually schedule a call with her and our team and ask more questions about how you can do this in your church. So Whitney, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Pastor, church leader, everybody, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you soon.